James, welcome in to the Maverick offices. First time in 5 years, right?
Yeah, it is, and it is really good to be here, and good to meet some of your colleagues as well, Dean. Yeah, really good to be here.
So we've known each other for what? 5 years since the
It is
pandemic, right?
crazy, and I've never met you in person.
No,
They always say don't meet your heroes, Dean. So is this going to be?
but have you?
Yeah,
um, so I thought I'd bring you in because one, you're running your own business, and that comes with all the fun. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, every business is having to manage costs and keep their profitability under control, and that's kind of your subject
yeah,
matter. So I thought we'd talk about some of those things. But first off, how's your business changed over the last few years? Because I think everybody's business has changed. AI, pandemic. What have you noticed the change in your business over the last few years? And maybe explain what you do as well.
yeah. So yeah, if I explain what I do, and I can explain much about that. So what we do in a nutshell is most businesses are generally quite well run, and the ability to find that marginal gain in profits is always really tough. And we effectively help those overhead costs and say, actually, that 2, 3, 4% growth you've seen over the last few years, how do you know effect you're paying a reasonable margin? Every business needs to make a return. But at what point are you paying too much for your insurance, for your photocopying, your mobile phone, your packaging, whatever it happens to be? Those incidental costs that normally add up to significant costs within a business. So what my business does is affect review those costs, use some of our experts within my network to look and say, actually, Dean, you know what? For that, you're paying a really good price. But for this, across more than 40,000 different projects we've done over the years, we think there's an opportunity for either a better supplier or better pricing. In a nutshell, that's what we do. And that benchmark knowledge that says you're getting a really good price, people think, great. Or you say, do you know what? It's an opportunity. We then help leverage that opportunity, normally through procurement and working with existing suppliers, and ultimately the opportunity to bring a new supplier in that we know, like, and trust. In terms of how that's evolved over the last 5 years, well, I've been doing it 5 years, so I've definitely got better. I think it gets easier, and I think it gets easier because you invest in yourself. You work with people like Maverick. You really start to make sure you understand some of the challenges businesses are facing. And although every client's different, get a sense of, yes, we've looked at that before, and generally speaking, fuel with that supplier, there might be an opportunity. So you start to really understand people's businesses, their costs. So I think that's evolved. I think I think the business environment's got really tough. I think people are less willing to take a risk, and working with us is absolutely not a risk. You know what? We've got a really key success based fee model that says if we can't find savings, then there's no cost, and if we can, we share in that to effectively make sure we've both got skin in the game, which works really well. But actually, sometimes I speak to business owners and they think, oh, am I going to look bad? These guys come in and save me £500,000. One client last week, we got to £1.5 million reduction in a new fleet replacement. So big numbers sometimes. And sometimes the CFO might think, do you know what, I'm going to look bad. Others are really good at saying coming in, but there seems to be, over the last year and a half, I think there's an element of people being more risk averse. Will this look bad on me? Uh, should I have done this a couple of years ago? And the best time to do it is today. If you didn't do it 2 years ago,
Do you know what? I mean, I was whinging to you about costs piling on businesses. One of the biggest things for me is those sneaky freaking subscriptions. Oh my God. And they just like jack up their prices as well. And you've kind of got dependent on them. So I've got one subscription software that we use all the time. There's a 25% price increase in January. So, and it's not cheap. No, it's not $14.99. It's like 500 quid a month, and it's going up by 25%. And all of these jack up. And I'm like, every so few months, we're having to go through and go, what the hell have we signed up for? And do we even need them? Do we even use them? And the worst bit is, it feels like sometimes they don't tell you you're still paying for it. And so you go, what is this? We never use this. And then you kick yourself because you've been paying for it month after month after month. And I've noticed I'm being way more ruthless with these
Which is
subscriptions
the
now.
way to do it. People get immune, and the problem is every time on the news people talk about 5% increase in this, 10% increase in this. When a letter comes to the door, occasionally you do still come through a door that says we're going to put your prices up. It says 6%. People think, oh, that's good. So everything else is at 10% or 25%. And people have come a bit immune to when there's inflation and, about 3.5% this year, but it has been 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. People almost expect prices to go up. So people have a little bit more of a laissez-faire attitude of, oh, we kind of knew prices were going to go up, and that's when people are less likely to challenge sometimes. So we find, particularly lately, when we go through people's cost base, there's an element of, well, yeah, but costs are going up, and you go, well, yes, they might be going up, but in that specific industry, in that particular supplier, in insurance, actually, often prices are coming down. So there's an element of, yes, there's inflation across the UK, but in terms of a specific market, and that's where you need an expert who can say, actually, I'm a packaging expert and I know the market, and that's kind of what we bring in. Because otherwise, how do you know what is 25% actually a really good uplift in the market, or should it be 4%? And that's the bit that we bring in, that intelligence, because it's really hard when you run your own business, when effectively every cost is your profit. Um, how do you know what the right price is other than gut feel or chat GPT, which is great for some things, but it has a limitation. And that insight into benchmarking and running a business well, actually that's a human interaction at the moment.
So thinking about this from your own business, and you mentioned about people are less likely.
Mm.
How are you finding them? I mean, obviously everybody wants to save money, reduce costs, but how do you find marketing that?
It's interesting because when I joined, it's a franchise model, and when I joined, that was my exact assumption. Well, everyone wants to save costs, and I think the problem is when people walk into their office on a Monday morning, fires are burning already. So you end up with the impact of someone knocking on the door saying there's a leak in the roof or there's production's down or whatever it happens to be, and people are fighting in the moment, and it feels that actually some of my best clients are actually very profitable, well-run businesses. They're a bit calmer, which is really different to the hypothesis I had at the start, which is actually if someone's struggling a bit, they'll be knocking on my door and we'll be having a conversation. Actually, probably, of my clients, the biggest proportion are those very well controlled businesses that know that extra marginal gain really has an impact. And those that are struggling are just struggling. And of course, everything becomes a challenge. And when we work with a client, we always start with let's understand the position, let's get some data. Of course, to get data takes time and you can't fight the fire. And I think that is the challenge sometimes, the fight and fires distracts people from what's a really obvious, well, surely you want to save money. And sometimes it sounds too good to be true. It's like, buy one, get one free. You think, well, what's the catch? And our catch is simply, we can look at your waste invoice, Dan, who heads up our waste team, can look at your waste invoice and say, yeah, really good price, leave it. Or we can say, you know what, there's an opportunity. And because we know what areas equal opportunity, we know we know when to work with clients and when to say, actually, Dean, we're okay. But no, the USP that you think everyone wants to save money is caveated by there's so many other competing priorities. And of course, making sure you can pay your staff is always up there. Sometimes that longer, okay, well, that's next year's budget. I'll worry about that. Particularly now we're getting into January, a lot of people have been thinking about budgets next year. And I always say for those organisations that have got their budget lined up for next year and think, well, we'll grow sales 15%. You think, well, if the economy is growing by 1.5% next year, inflation allegedly 2.5%, then ultimately any growth more than 4%, you're outpacing the economy. So you're either going to charge more than you should for your services, or your plan doesn't stack up. And often it's the plan doesn't stack up. And that's the thing. We all sit there as business owners with a little spreadsheet. I'll be doing mine over Christmas, and you think, what does next year look like? And you start thinking, well, where will I grow? And I think that growth is really difficult in the economy. With the budget a couple of weeks ago, apparently people's disposable incomes will grow by 0.25% for the next 10 years. 0.25%.
So in other words, it's going backwards
Yeah,
basically when you count
yeah.
inflation.
I mean, so in reality, consumer confidence is difficult. So again, if you're in a retail industry, your next few years of what's demand going to really be like, you're going to see a quite cautious, careful public, and of course, if that then flows through to your top line. Then it's a perfect time to look at your bottom line, because ultimately, if you can't grow your top line, and ultimately, a great way to shave money off your bottom line is make sure you're not spending money either on the things you shouldn't, or if you are have to spend money on things, then ultimately don't spend too much.
So just got promoted
Oh, thanks.
prime minister.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
About time too, Dean.
Um, you're now prime minister. You're looking at the UK. What do you change?
Oh, what a good question.
Well, let me put it another way, right? If the UK was a business and you go, hang on a minute, but can't keep increasing revenue to cover costs without some kind of negative impact somewhere. But it seems like these guys don't really want to cut any costs. But and this is just my maths.
Yeah.
This is just my maths. Your civil servants, your doctors, your nurses, they're going to want pay rises every year because that's going on. And don't even need to get into what's fair, what's not. We'll just, everybody's costs are going up. So that means they talk it. Rachel Reeves said the 21 billion headroom. In other words, the gap. But next year they're going to need to do pay rises. Everything's going up. So it just feels like there's a never-ending cycle of tax rises coming.
Yeah, and there is some headroom. I mean, so this time last year, everyone, all of the economists looked and said, actually, she's going to have to put taxes up. Here we are. It's gone up. There seems to be a bit more confidence, but that's not answering your question. So every group, whether it's Conservative or Labour, keeps saying the same thing. We want to grow the economy. You grow the economy, more people are in jobs, more people then pay tax, more people then buy ice creams, go on holiday, all of that stuff that generates a strong economy and a strong UK. That's the aim. The budget that we saw last 2-3 weeks ago, one of the statements from the OBR was there was not one item in the budget that generated growth in the UK economy. I mean, if I was the CFO in the NHS for a long time, and if I put my annual budget to the board, there are certain things you'd expect to see. And if someone said, James, there's not one line here that's going to generate any growth in the organization, I think that's, fellow directors would say, are you up to it? And, that's not a political statement. That's just simply the one aim of most governments is how do I grow the economy? This year it'll grow, 2026, 1.4%. That's negligible. US is doing well. EU is struggling. Our biggest trading partner we got divorced from, which again, on paper and in reality, wouldn't be something that you choose. So we've made some interesting choices as a government, but I think it's things that grow the prosperity of the UK. HS2 and all these things actually on paper as an accountant are the right things. You employ people, you build items, you You have lots of builders, lots of traffic jams as well as a result. But you see the builders happening. Money goes into the economy. It drives the economy. It grows the economy, and that's why lots of countries build roads. They build rail infrastructure. Well, you seem to be rubbish at it. So even the things that on paper make sense, invest in capital items, infrastructure, we just seem to spend billions and billions and billions and not control it. So we just seem to struggle to even do the things that you would tick as an economist and say, yeah, really good idea. That'll generate revenue for the country. Good thing. But it just seems to be can't then work out what the route should be. We stop it, we start it, we shrink it because we can't afford it. And that's just no way to run a business or a country. And that's kind of where we are at the moment. And for business owners, it's really difficult to plan. So what everyone wants is stability. Everyone wants to think, right, 5 years, I know what my taxes will look like roughly. And at this point in time, everyone's waiting for the budget thinking, well, is the minimum wage going to go up far more than I expected? Is NI going to appear? Is there going to be some sneaky thing on tax deductibles? And that's the problem. Everyone's kind of, well, I don't want to invest now. And of course, again, if you're the prime minister, if all of your businesses are thinking, actually, I could register in America and pay less tax and all these benefits or somewhere else, that's not what you want.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people leaving because of that. But to me, it seems like the growth piece not very simple. Of course, it's not as simple as that, but it feels to me like the fundamentals of growing the UK economy is actually getting people to buy stuff from our businesses outside of the UK.
And the,
That's how you grow an
and,
economy.
and the problem is we don't grow a lot. And that is, it kind of worked in the EU because you had one kind of internal economy, just happened to be with Europe as well. But most of the things we buy in this country, we buy from somewhere else. So of course, there's no wealth creation within the UK. Farmers got very angry at the previous budget as to what happened to them and future generations. So we're not even investing in things like farming. Technology in farming could be a real benefit for the UK. But of course, so much of that comes, Tesco's and all of the other big supermarkets buy so much from abroad. So again, you're right, Dean. But in effect, the UK has lost a lot of the industry, the car industries, all of the industries that you would associate with the UK are now replaced by service economy, banks, consultants. But we're just not building and growing like we used to, and that is a challenge. That is a challenge.
Do you think like like labor as well, the globalization, the fact that you get freelancers from all around the
Yeah.
world means, I know this sounds horrible, but if you've got people around the world who will work for higher skilled but expect less money, if you go to Asia and you can get somebody for $10 an hour and that's a really good living there, but to get somebody the same skill set here, it's probably, I don't know, £20 an hour or something. And might be out of whack there with those numbers. But you get my point. It's
Yeah, I
like
do.
we've got this weird ability to choose as business owners and as businesses that means that actually in some ways our lack of competitiveness as a country means when it doesn't benefit the country, we're doing what benefits ourselves.
Yeah, and I think if you go on a cruise ship, most of the individuals who work on that cruise ship, do that because it's very, very, very good money that they send home. But very few of them are ever Brits on a cruise ship at the performing arts aside. So, you're right. In a global economy, there's the ability to choose. And we hear time and time again, we want Britain to be a market leader in AI and a market leader in XYZ. But there's a real challenge. And, as I said, I was the CFO in the NHS. And, you know, it, a lot of the cleaners, a lot of the clinicals, like the support nurses, etc., were from EU, Eastern European EU countries. They work really hard. And one of the visa changes Labour's made is actually they wouldn't be able to do those jobs, and Brexit tied in with that. But actually, that's not being replaced by a load of Brits wanting to do that work. So we've got a really interesting economy where And if people want to work, but there's certain jobs they don't want to do,
Yeah.
and actually, you get paid more working in Costa than you do helping someone in their last days of life, and that- that's just kind of how our workforce is structured in many things. But the pay scales we have in the UK, some of them are slightly odd for the value and what they bring to people's lives, particularly towards the end of them as well.
Mm. And so, if you were starting a business or you were advising somebody to start a business, because you've got that CFO background, you're also doing the kind of procurement and cost reduction. What would don't say don't start a business in the UK, but if somebody was going to start a business in the UK, maybe they're coming out of corporate, maybe like you've come out of working in the NHS, saying central government stuff like that. What would be your advice to them in terms of starting a business?
That's a great question. And so I work with a business coach, and one of the things that he always taught me from quite early on after I started my business was work with the best people. So it's really easy as a business owner to think, well, I don't want to spend money on that. I'll do it myself. And I started there. I had a list of things I thought I could do that. I could do telemarketing. James is the world's worst telemarketer. But again, you think, I'm going to save some money. I'm not paying a telemarketer. I can do that. Oh, I've never used LinkedIn before, but I could give it a go. And of course, quite quickly, you think, actually, I need to talk to team at Maverick to say how do I really understand LinkedIn? I work with my business coach to say how do I make sure I set good objectives and I'm really clear where my business is going. And to be honest, since I've done that, my business has tripled in size every year. But you need to really understand where you're going. I knew nothing about sales, so I work with a sales coach. I've got more books than I've ever read or tried to read in my life as CFO. And I think that personal development and investment. So I think if you're going to run a business, think about what you can do yourself. I'm an accountant, and yeah, I've got an accountant. I do not know the best way to make sure HMRC don't come chasing after me because of one thing with that or something else. I could find out, but actually, I'm far better running my own business than doing that. And I think the element for business owners is just surround yourself by some experts who really understand their field. Copywriting, I work with one of the best copywriters in the UK, and again, you know, uh, sometimes you might see that as a cost. Other times you've got to see it as investment. Because once you've got those skills and knowledge and understand LinkedIn or understand, actually, yeah, I've got some business goals for the year. Yeah, it's really clear. How else do you take your business forward? So I think work with the best people, understand what your knowledge is, where your gaps are, where you've got gaps. Think about how you fill them, which might be someone, as you rightly said, in South Africa, where it is that fills and works for your business. But without a doubt, when you try and do everything, you can't. I was lucky in my old world, I could walk out and talk to the marketing team, my finance team, and countless other teams. Now that's just me. As I say, I kind of operate within a franchise environment, so I have a network of colleagues, which is a real strength. But my business is still just me. So yeah, if you don't work with the right people, you'll never get it off the ground, and that'd be absolutely my advice. And obviously, that's why we know each other too.
Yeah, yeah. And thinking about your kind of little LinkedIn journey, what's been like what's been the bits that have like what have been the distractions on LinkedIn?
Oh. LinkedIn itself. I mean, and it's really interesting because as a CFO in the NHS, I never even had LinkedIn. It was just not something I ever thought of. And as I was going through the process of, oh, I quite like the idea of a franchise and stuff. And I was talking to the recruitment team. He said, "Oh, can you send over your LinkedIn?" I was like, "Oh, yeah." Quickly logged on LinkedIn. That was it. Zero connections. I think I had a photo, and I was like, "Right, LinkedIn." And we did sort of our training to join the franchise, and he sort of said, "Oh, you should have a think about LinkedIn." I thought, "Oh, yeah, okay, I'll get a few connections and stuff." But I didn't understand it as a tool whatsoever, and working with your colleagues and all of your team that have been really helpful, Dean. I think I start to realize actually all of the bits and pieces to make up LinkedIn are important. So all of those bits that say, if you got some skills, you know, all of those things that is really your shop window, I just never looked at. And, you know, still to this day, the most clients I've signed up in a short window was on the back of webinars. And again, would I have ever thought of doing a webinar if it wasn't for working with you and your team? My newsletter the other week, seen by 60,000 people because it was topical, talking about the budgets, etc. And again, would I have had a newsletter if it wasn't working with your team? And I think they're the things like all systems. You can think of LinkedIn as a way of connecting and occasionally messaging someone. You can really think about how do I help people understand me and what I can bring. And I've been really, really lucky. Got the nice blue tick that says I'm an influencer or whatever the title is on LinkedIn. And the LinkedIn news team sort of liked some of the things I did in my space. And that's quite unique for what people do on LinkedIn. You know, I try and add value. And I think the value piece, and you're very, very good at this, Dean, of how do you add value? So it's not just a sales pitch, but it kind of tells a story that says, actually, I worked with a company last week and they had these challenges and I helped them or my team helped them and people think, oh, okay, that's interesting. And that people to associate themselves and Dean, you know, you're very, very good at understanding sales and psychology as well. And I think I've learned a lot from that as well. So I think my LinkedIn journey is from zero connections to 16, 17,000, and actually quite a strong following and the ability to post and connect, all of which I would not have done if it wasn't for working with you and your team to say, what on earth is LinkedIn and how do you use it? And now I'm addicted to that thing when it pops up on your
Well, don't
screen.
get too don't get too addicted. You know.
I think we all do, don't we?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is um, the platform itself. Just to throw LinkedIn under a bus for a minute, is wired to further its business
Oh,
agenda.
absolutely.
And sometimes I've found this, and Tom will say this, and you've probably seen it, is you end up going down that rabbit hole of, diving into stuff. And you have to kind of go like, is this actually furthering
Mm.
my business? Is this one activity? And one of my terrible ones is refreshing stats. Do you do this? Just go to a post like a couple of times a day and check stats and see how it's doing.
What ones to doing quite well. Yeah, it's easy to do. It is easy to do, and yes, you can get a bit lost. But I connected with a guy 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I just sent him a message saying, thanks for connecting. And he responded saying, let's get a coffee. I said, oh, right. Then last week I was in London meeting him in his offices, having a really, really fascinating chat about his organisation. £500 million organisation, so significant size for any criteria. And we were having a similar conversation to what we were just having about kind of actually costs are growing, some costs we control really well, and we've got a team of people that know that cost base inside and out. But actually, not sure we ever really look at waste, and we're not sure insurance. Well, kind of pay what the broker says, but sure we've got the skills to challenge them quite quickly, and then fuel and a few other things as well. And quite quickly, it was okay, I can see the value, and that was purely on the basis of a connection, one connection. And then a couple of weeks on, we're meeting in London, and and that is the power of LinkedIn. That me and this guy, never met before, did know each other, just looked like an interesting role, a type that I generally connect with. And the next minute we're meeting together, and I think that is where LinkedIn has a power that, like, in the old days, you may wrote someone a letter and it might land on the desk, but actually, a LinkedIn does get straight to the individual. There's no gatekeeper. When I was in the NHS, my PA wouldn't let anyone ever through on the phone to me. She was very good. But now, when you actually want to connect with someone, you think, oh, and that's where LinkedIn has a real power to connect you.
And thinking about sales, from
Mm,
obviously that must have been a bit of a journey coming from finance director to sales.
more so than I ever realised. In I thought I didn't really think about it. I just thought, yeah, it'd be fine. Could the biggest difference in my career is absolutely that.
What was the bit that you found the hardest to get your head around?
I think the bit that oh, I think I still find it a challenge. I mean, I think, I think when you're a finance director, anyone you ever email, they respond normally within about 4 minutes because you're the finance director. So generally, my old team, as a I looked after 2.5 billion budget in the end, but you knew you could email people and you kind of had a status and you could get stuff done. Now I email even to my like very very best clients that I'll go out for a meal with, and very very good terms. It might still take 5 or 6 emails, and maybe that's not sales. Maybe that's just you're external to the organization, and you're trying to help someone move forward their organization, but you're kind of not on a periphery of right. I must email James back immediately because he's the boss. So that that change of influence, and I think where you started the conversation of, well, surely everyone wants to save money. Yeah, I mean that's the assumption too. And when I have a conversation with people, my starting point is always, I've no idea if it's a good fit, but let's have a conversation and see, understand where you spend some money. Our margins a challenge. What does next year look like? And that's a conversation, but in reality, everything we do becomes some sort of sales interaction. On my way here, I went to the petrol station, I bought some fuel. It's a sales interaction. I think sometimes we're a bit, oh, sales, oh, it's a dirty word. And you think, well, actually, it's what the economy needs to grow. So yeah, it's been a real impact of a lack of skills to me in sales, and I've been tried to learn, invest in that. And I think the more you have conversations, the slightly easier that is. And then I think there's the personal element of, you know, what is my job title? What is your job title? Am I a salesman? Am I a consultant? Am I a procurement consultant? Am I a financial advisor? I could choose any of them, but I wouldn't associate myself as a salesperson because ultimately, I think I had a lot of value and knowledge and expertise. But in reality, the world is sales.
Did you find it a bit icky at the beginning? Because I mean, you know what you're doing. You know, managing a £2.5 billion budget. You know how to manage costs, find costs.
Hmm,
You know what you're doing. But the act of going on LinkedIn or anything like that, selling in one sense yourself. How did you find that?
hard, yeah, really, really hard. And I think when you work in finance, you're good on spreadsheets, you're good on looking at patterns and helping drive change. But when you're an employee, you've got a job description, you've got a role, that's your
Yeah.
job, that's it. When you're external and you're a consultant or a coach or whatever the role is, you've kind of got to find a way to say, hi, I exist. Like no one wakes up in the middle of the night desperately thinking, oh, I must speak to James, I need a procurement or people think, actually, I've already got a procurement team. And actually, some of my very, very best clients have a procurement function, and a big one. And what they recognize is they might they'll procure what they do. So if they're a window making factory, they'll buy plastic and glass better than I ever could. But how they get those goods to and from the factory, how they manage their insurance, how they buy the screws, and all the other bits and pieces. When you have a conversation, normally there's a just don't really think about that. We focus on glass and plastic. We don't think about the other stuff, and that's where we add value. But that all starts with a people don't always know what exists until you kind of knock on a door and say we exist, and then they go, oh yeah, we don't really look at that. Okay, well there might be some value there. Oh, we could be overpaying. Oh, so that's the element that you think, well, sales interactions has to start with a virtual knock on a window of some sort, and then after that is there some curiosity to say, yeah, okay, well that might be worth a look, or actually, yeah, So yeah, but it all starts as some sort of sales interaction or post on LinkedIn. Even that first post on LinkedIn, I was like, "Oh, that button mean? How does that do?" And you
Did
become
you find
much
it a bit
familiar.
cringe?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right. It's yourself, isn't it? And I think, as I said, that's the difference between as an employee, you can kind of if you post, you're kind of doing it on behalf of your organization. You've got that protection. But when it's your business, and I think on LinkedIn as well, it's very much you, isn't it? So when you put a selfie up or a video or whatever, it feels. Oh, what happens if someone comments? And actually, I couldn't tell you how many posts I've done over these 5 years, but I'm not sure I've ever particularly had a really negative comment. But sometimes
We
you think,
obsess about worrying about it
yeah,
coming, though, don't we?
yeah, you think, oh, like, what would someone say about that? And actually, I find people are very friendly, and occasionally someone might ask a clarification question, which is great because it's the how you get the kind of the conversation going. But I think at the start, I think, oh, what happens if everyone starts to laugh or say, oh, it's not very good, and that's part of the journey, I think, on LinkedIn. That actually everyone's voice is really valid, and actually so few people actually post, which I think is one of the stats you shared with me a long time ago. And you think, oh, right, and so few people comment. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people hit the like button because it's easy.
Yeah.
Very few people take the time to say, "Oh, James, Dean, Tom, that's a really good comment or post. I really like that." But you spot it, don't you? When you're in your feed, you think, "Oh, who's been nice?"
And it's weird how people say to you, "Oh, I see all your posts," and you're like, "Who are you?"
Yeah. That happens so often. I was at an event last week, and someone grabbed their wife and introduced me as James, this guy he knows off LinkedIn, which is quite nice because you think, oh, it kind of does work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think, all right, I'm not sure he's ever commented or liked on any post of mine. So you have that awkward moment of, oh, thanks. But yeah, it's absolutely the ability. I say it's the ability to connect. It's not like not quite Facebook where everyone's your friend, but there is an element of there is some sort of networking connection which I value my LinkedIn.
So, just thinking about your own customers for a minute, one of the things I find, particularly with somebody with like your level of experience and subject matter knowledge, I find a lot of people struggle with because you're like nerded out in what you do. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Right. How do you stay in touch with the customer's perspective of what their priorities are? Where, like, most businesses should be doing those things, but often they're not thinking about it. How do you get the customer's perspective on what you do?
I think a should's a really good word actually because we should do so many things, and I think business owners and leaders also have a long should list of yeah, well, I know I should really be thinking about my plan for not just next year, next 5 years, but actually I've a plan for a month ahead, or of my workforce plans and all those other things. So should's a great word, and I think, and that's the challenge of consultants, and that's why consultants exist. We exist because ultimately it should shortcut the knowledge it takes. So rather than let's make 5 years of mistakes, get some consultants in that should short circuit the learning curve of 5 years to 5 weeks. It should help you not make some mistakes, and that list of should become a quite a clear plan of this is now what I need to do for the next 5, 6, 7 weeks or months. And I think what I always really enjoy is I work with some really, really switched on CFOs that blow my mind how impressive they are. And I think, oh, I've got to meet next week with that individual. I need to be 5 steps ahead, four and a half maybe, if I can, of where they're going to be. And you get a real sense of where they are. And sometimes, we did a telecoms project a couple of weeks ago for quite a large retailer that most people have bought some furniture from in their Christmas sales. But anyway, and we saved them 60% on their mobile phones. And they give us some rules. They said, actually, we're with EE, don't want to move from EE. Okay. because normally the best thing you can do is kind of take stuff to the market. The tighter
Beat somebody up.
the tighter you get to, well, actually, we don't want to move network and we don't want to change handsets and change SIM cards. You think, okay, well, that limits us. And we delivered them a 60% saving, which is remarkable. And it just shows the depth of knowledge of our specialists, all of which live and breathe their area. So guys who do telecoms don't do waste as well. They just do telecoms. And the thing is, the CFO was blown away. And that's the difference sometimes you forget what we do and how good it is. And, their IT team owned that, and we're never going to be able to deliver that. And I think they thought, oh, once we say you can't move network, you're going to be coming back with a 2% saving, and guys did a tremendous job. But I think going back to the kind of question of, how do you try and keep ahead? I think sometimes as you get examples of excellence and where you deliver really well, you think, actually, I need to do this more. And one of the things I'm going to do this January, which I've never done before, is go on a road trip to meet every one of my clients in January to talk about 2026 and their plans. Because I think sometimes it's quite easy to say, oh, I've noticed, Dean, we've not done an insurance project with you, or we've not really looked at your fuel card spend. But sometimes there's an element of actually just spending time to say, well, what's happening in the business? Where are you? Oh, right, you're doing more work in France. So that's interesting. That ties in with something else we've been doing. And I think we're all a bit guilty sometimes of talked about the NHS, but kind of trying to be the GP that you walk in and going, I know what's wrong with you, Dean. Take 5 of these and come back next week. And I think that excellence and element for me is, really, really, really making sure I understand each of my clients as well as I can, to work out what the prescription looks like, to say, actually, these are some of the areas that in that industry, retail, manufacturing, logistics, whatever it happens to be, these are some of the areas that I think would add the most value. So it's listening, and I think all too often it's easy, and I certainly did this at the start of my career in sales, is kind of sit there and prejudge what they should be buying before you've even had a conversation. The logistics company, well, okay, well, they've probably got quite a few forklift trucks. They've probably got a few vehicles, probably fuel, PPE, and you start doing that as opposed to the conversation with them. Says, "God, what's going on? IT's a problem. Okay, right. Well, let's talk about IT." And I think going back to the kind of the 5-year journey from a prescription to a much more laser focused, let's have a conversation, see where you are, Dean, and on the back of that, we'll work out what a plan looks like.
Because it's easy to go, oh yeah, supply chain logistics, it's going to be fuel
Yeah,
or something like that.
absolutely.
And you walk in and go, so you want to save any fuel? And go, actually, I've just locked it down for the next 5 years. No thanks.
And then you go, oh, what about tires? And you go, no, I've done that, and it becomes like bingo.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I mean, what I always really enjoy doing is going out to a client, just like coming here today. You drive in and you get a sense, and I can see where the money's spent straight away. You kind of sat, and particularly in Yorkshire, the reception's always so friendly and warm. You get such an insight into the culture of the organisation, what's going on. I always look and see what's going on, sort of logistics, who's dropping stuff, who's picking stuff up, what's going on. But there is definitely something about the having a conversation, and I think that's true about anything you sell or any coaching, any consultancy. It's got to be tailored to that organisation, and I think I think all of these are a lot of the learning points over the last 5 years, and I think will continue for the next 5. I mean, I've learned a huge amount in these 5 years, more so than I would have as 5 years as a CFO, because you kind of think, I know what I'm doing in that. I started doing this with zero knowledge, but thought, well, what's some of my gaps? Oh, LinkedIn, right, okay, and all of those things. But it now feels much easier than it did at the start, which has to be success.
Yeah. And it's muscle memory as well, isn't
It
it?
is.
The more you do it, the more you get comfortable with it, the more it becomes like that first post you did probably took you an hour and a half, but now
At
you're
least.
probably bashing them out in 20 minutes, kind of.
Absolutely. And do you know what I always enjoy because some posts really fly, and others you just think, actually, that was a really, really good post, and only my mum saw it. And that's the thing with LinkedIn. There's some oddities sometimes, and you think I've really worked well on that post. It really adds value. I thought it was great, and literally, a handful of people say, and others, you think that's absolutely flown, and I can't quite work out why. But if you knew, and that's it, isn't it? And sometimes you do flick through your feed, and sometimes you go, "Oh, that's really interesting." Actually, I mean, the feed does work sometimes, and I sometimes do go, "Oh,
Sometimes.
yeah, I never knew that." Others, it's a bit of a loss, really, but I still really enjoy it and find myself posting and trying things, and I think I found the webinar function a bit clunky, so I kind of put myself off it a bit. But I say, like, it was quite nice to use the platform for something slightly different. Same with the videos. Actually, they went crazy for a while and gone a bit quieter again in the feed. You don't see as many, so it shows how it evolves and changes the feed.
So you mentioned about the 5 years, and obviously the big elephant in the room is what does business look like in 5 years' time with AI? Because obviously there's all these promises of efficiencies, and you won't need as many humans and all that kind of stuff. Are you seeing any businesses look at it seriously? And what do you reckon? There's going to be an AI revolution, but there's a lot of people going. I think it's something like a stat: 95% of AI projects have failed to deliver ROI at the moment. What's your take on where it'll end up?
So I saw a really interesting stat. It was probably about 5 6 months ago, just as saw a lot of commentary about AI, and it said I was late 80s. Lotus 123 was this new pre Excel spreadsheet system, and accountants were up in arms because it was going to see accountants out of jobs. So it was they showed the article of the day, and it kind of said, look, like bookkeepers and accountants, like calculators and pieces of paper, and like, oh, there's going to be no accountants left because these evil spreadsheets are going to take away. And and interestingly, the stats then said actually there's more accountants than ever before. What you've seen though is a skill shift. So those people that would have effectively helped manage paper ledgers, that skill doesn't exist anymore. But people who can use Excel and data data sort of extraction and those other things, really key roles. So it kind of said, I think it was something like the number of roles in finance had doubled, but the skills had changed. And I think AI has the real ability to do that. I was with a very, very impressive data company a week ago, and they were showing me some of the stuff they do on predictive analysis overlaid with AI, and literally got some very, very clever data scientists that predicted what something looks like over the next 5 years, and then you could break out a chat GPT type system that said, tell me what happens if I change this, and it immediately changed the parameters. And that and that ability to see data analysis without having the skills of data analysis was really, really powerful. That the conversation I had with them, and I think it's really relevant to this conversation, is you still need to understand what you're asking AI to do and what analysis you got back. So AI actually did its own check. So it said, AI kind of said, if you do X, Y, Z, it will have X, Y, Z impact. And it showed its workings to show, I thought about this, that wasn't accurate enough. Thought about this, wasn't accurate enough. So I've done this. And in the conclusion we had, it was actually, this is where now titles like data engineer, data scientist are the bookkeeper equivalent of, actually, you still going to need people, and businesses like mine, like yours, will still have humans, but there'll be elements where AI can shortcut some elements, but you need to understand, is it a shortcut? Is it something that you're going to base a decision on? When I was doing my accountancy exams, it's some of the big, like, kind of marks you get when you're doing your exams would be kind of a very complex analysis of, oh, am I going to buy this? Am I going to lease this? Actually, ChatGPT could tell you in 20 seconds now, whereas accountants, in my exams, that was probably an hour question, which I've never ever done since. But and that's the thing. There are some technical stuff that AI can do really well. Would you then, as a business, decide you're going to put 60, 70, 80 million of capital investment into the purchase of an item because ChatGPT said, yes, right call. And that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
At what point you laughed, but actually some business owners will be sat there saying, well, ChatGPT said I should do that, put my prices up 20%, so I have done. And of course, there's an element of that human just stop, like,
Humans are not very predictable.
yeah, well, I mean that's part of the challenge, and I think you're absolutely right. When you look at AI, it tries to predict the unpredictable. So if you ask ChatGPT what the 6 winning lottery numbers are this week, it'll tell you. It's not very good at saying, but it's only a guess, James, and well, the odds are not very good. Like it gives a very positive answer to anything you ask it. If I say, "Do I look good?" It'll say, "Yes, of course." It's got no kind of filter of any negative, and the same with that business starting to make decisions of, well, I don't need the marketing department. I'll just ask ChatGPT. I don't need a finance department. I'll ask ChatGPT, and I think the biggest risk is those businesses that really think exactly that. Well, I don't need the 6 accountants. I'll just use ChatGPT because there's an element of going too far and making a risk.
So, James, thank you for coming in. We've gone everywhere.
We have.
LinkedIn, AI, the NHS, the government, procurement, costs, inflation. Thank you so much for coming in. People want to talk to you, find out more. Where's the best place? LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is definitely the best place to come and have a conversation. I always say, really, it all starts with a conversation to see if there's a fit, and I always do my best in any conversation to make sure someone leaves with some value, whether we help them reduce their costs or they leave with some opportunities to think, actually, some elements here I can do. What normally happens in that conversation is you check in 6 months and you go, oh, almost got to it. And that's sometimes a challenge, but no, LinkedIn's definitely the best way to connect and have a conversation.